I wanted the system that we're playing to be able to support this sort of depth, like going from this very high level, like, oh, you're just, battling crocodiles in the local swamp, actual thing that happened. Or if you want to then eventually be like, oh, you're fighting this eldritch abomination from several thousand years ago that's been sleeping until now.
Hello, adventurers, and welcome to Design Journals, a new series where I sit down with Varun to discuss Call to Power. Today, we're discussing mechanics that are unique to Call to Power. What really stands out to me is that you go from pretty weak in Call to Power to extremely strong, almost godlike. What made you decide on this power scaling that you did?
Well, so it really comes down to the stories I wanted to tell, right? Like when I was starting my campaign, maybe I was interested in more of a low fantasy, like, okay, we're just playing, almost classic adventure fantasy like D&D would give you. But I wanted to be able to open up that door, right? Like, as in, I always liked those stories. Actually, even like the animated series Vox Machina showed this, where like there's this sort of demonic background presence, right? And at
Mhm.
some point, I wanted to go more deep into that, and then I was like, okay, well, now there's a bigger fish. There's the demons, and then you go into it. There's a bigger fish. There's their bosses. There's the demon princes. And then you just keep expanding, and I wanted the system that we're playing to be able to support this sort of depth, like going from this very high level, like, oh, you're just, battling crocodiles in the local swamp, actual thing that happened. Or if you want to then eventually be like, oh, you're fighting this eldritch abomination from several thousand years ago that's been sleeping until now, right? These are
Wow.
both things that need to happen in the same campaign. And the depth of the power scaling is really just about making sure that we can tell those stories.
Okay. So how would you compare your specific leveling system to, say, D&D or Pathfinder or even Call of Cthulhu?
Yeah, so we're a 40 leveling system. So like our max level is 40, but that's kind of like a soft limit as we've kind of talked about in my player group. It's more like 40 plus is really like there's a sort of implicit like if you do everything right, if you've got all of your levels maxed out and you've got all of your paths of power because we have multiple of them maxed out, then you're going to be more than 40 effectively. There's a difference between someone who just hit 40 and someone who's been 40 for a while and has accumulated all of these other forms of power. And it's really like our level 20 is like a level 25 or 30 in classic D&D. We really want to make sure that you have the like room to feel like a god. By the time you're hitting our level 20, the affairs of a continent really aren't your problem. Like if you wanted to erase a continent, you could do that. That's just and it's not a big deal. It's not like this, oh, this is a whole quest line. It's just you decided to one day you woke up and chose violence and that continent's gone now.
That's crazy. That's awesome. I was going to touch on, I think it was really interesting how you were mentioning the 40 plus. I think that adds a lot of not just horizontal, but also vertical scaling. Kind of pick and choose how you want to expand your character. I think that's really unique. I love that.
Yeah.
On calltopowerrpg.com, you mentioned that there's built-in mechanics for exploring realms and realities on that same vein. So how linear are campaigns for Call to Power?
I always like to say that the campaigns shouldn't be as linear as maybe some of the other adventure modules. Even the first adventure we've officially released is Seeking Color, or sort of Chapter Zero. It is extremely non-linear. It's very much a sandbox environment, and the point of this approach is that we want GMs and players to feel like when they're doing their collaborative stories, when they're talking about these sort of like long running campaigns that are really in depth and going in a lot of different directions, it's as chaotic as life, right? Like life isn't
Mm.
just a single path. We want it to be able to expand in different directions. So like, oh, you want to flesh out this person's backstory and then involves this like eldritch abomination or involves this ancient deity or whatever it is. Like you need to have that flexibility to go in these different ways and still be able to come back to your central line if you want to. Almost like a main quest and side quest approach.
Okay, I really like that. I feel like that also offers a lot of tools for the storyteller to kind of hook the players back into whatever the main intention is for the session or the campaign, while still giving them some ability to meander into their own stories. I really like that.
Yeah, I think one of my big beliefs as a storyteller is that when you're telling your story, you should be able to go on a tangent, go really flesh out something, and then come back to wherever you came from. This flexibility, I think, is just like a core part of how I storytell, but also like I think
Mm.
how you can really make sure that you and your players are on the same page of what's cool, right? Like I can throw 50 hooks at them across a session about like random things that I might want to talk about, and they're not going to hear or notice or even care about like 49 of them. But that means that the one that they chose really matters to them, and that means that's something that we get to really talk about more.
Oh, that's really exciting. I love that. The more tools that DMs can get, the better. And one of the biggest problems that I think DMs have is balancing really cool items, like for example in D&D. But however, you have a framework that allows us to balance them almost immediately. So how does this modular tool work for bringing a player's ideas to life?
Yeah, so we have this big chart that is essentially for every level, what is the expected range of different like stats and things, and how much can you really push the system? And it's basically this tool that when you look at it, when you build your item, you look at it and you compare it to this, then the item shouldn't break the scale. If at any point you break the scale, then it means that something's gone wrong. Or if you're seeing someone maxing out the scale, that's also wrong because we've talked about before, things have to come at a cost, right? If you're maxing out
Right.
one stat, that means something else has to give, right? And so balancing it from this perspective makes it super easy. You'd be like, oh, I want to give this character a plus 15 to something. Can't. The chart says you can't. That's too strong for their
Right.
current level. You could make it maybe scaling. You could make it you're adding your tier, which is 1/4 your level, and now that fits in the chart perfectly because the chart expects something like that.
Hmm. It's very helpful. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas that players and DMs get in the middle of a game, and now the DM has to figure out how to make sure it's not too powerful.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
very helpful. One other thing I wanted to talk about is that the session starts with a card or three actually being drawn from the deck of fates. How does the deck of fates intertwine with the setting and the rest of the mechanics?
Oh, I love this question because I always say in the book that the storyteller and the players kind of exist in the characters' world. Actually, they're not necessarily like characters or NPCs. The players themselves are kind of like these meta characters, just like
Mm.
Fate. And the game master is also one of the meta characters, Fate. There's also another one called Death, but that's a different story. Fate, the role of Fate in the game is to draw this deck of Fate. That means the GM, as you're saying, at the start of the session, draws these three cards, and those cards are kind of like a tarot reading, but they're self-fulfilling because the GM is obviously in control, so they can decide how much they're going to listen to the cards. But the cards will say something like Ruin or Calamity or Genesis or Prosperity, and they kind of give you the themes of the session, where the more of a card you draw, the more relevant that theme is. Like, and this is really helpful for sort of like adding an improvisational twist, right? Like rather than just reading your adventure module like as is and being like, oh, first this happens and this happens and this happens. Maybe you draw a specific card draw and you're like, oh, actually, like the local like town they were supposed to visit on their way to the big city like actually got destroyed by demons because they drew a bunch of ruins and strifes and all these horrible things, right? And then the players, as going back to like that sort of open-endedness, right? Maybe the players want to investigate more. Maybe they want to figure out what happened to this town, or maybe they're like, you know what? No, we're tired. We're just trying to get to the city. It's unfortunate that this town died, but we're going to keep going. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
kind of creates these more interesting moments where like it's really hard for the players to predict exactly what's going to happen because even the
Hmm.
GM doesn't know exactly what's going to happen, right? There's a little bit of sort of like this chaotic improvisation that's going to happen, which really opens up a lot of doors, I think.
Yeah, and I think it especially makes a lot of the future of Call to Power replayable for even one person. And that's really exciting. And you mentioned your um, one shot that you have prepped. And I think people can be able to test those at different conventions. I think that is really exciting. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that when I released Seek and Color, it was a huge question of like, is this gonna work? Because it's actually like a roguelite, right? Like a roguelite RPG
Mm.
for some reason. No one ever has like I'm sure there's a few floating around, but I've actually not seen a whole lot of roguelite RPGs. And so it's really interesting because I was like, oh, this might work, this might not work, but people have been really loving it. So definitely, if you get a chance to play Seek and Color, you definitely should take that.
And how would people be able to get a chance to play Seeking Color?
Well, we do virtual weekends once a quarter. Otherwise, you can show up at your local shows. Otherwise, when the quick start's released later this year, you can get your own copy and it has Seeking Color in it, and you can actually run it for your own friend group.
That's really exciting. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for this design journal entry. But I think in the future, we're going to be covering a little bit more into how characters are created and a little bit more into that death system that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.